Good morning, church. My name's Paul Whitman, and I'm a member of the morning congregation here at St. George's. I can often be found standing behind the keys here as part of the worship band, and I'm also part of the PCC here at St. George's. And whether you're here in the building this morning or joining us on the live stream, it's a real privilege to have this opportunity to lead our reflections together as we continue to explore this idea of Jesus meets. If you remember, and those of you that were here, you'll remember that last week Mark Pallant had us lacing up our running shoes as we thought about Philip and the Ethiopian, as he challenged us to think about who we are running alongside, who we could be supporting and sharing the good news with. Today we're looking at another meeting in Acts between Ananias and Saul, and thinking about listening to God's instructions. Now, it's often really important that we do what we're asked to do. Being clear on what someone expects of us means that we can try and do the right thing. But sometimes we get asked to do things that we don't want to do. And that's often a bit less fun. So I've got a question for you. I'd like you to put your hand up, please, if you like being told to do something that you don't want to do. Okay, we've got one or two extreme views there. But generally, we don't like being asked to do something that we don't want to do. So I'm a little bit curious about that. What I'd like you to do is, just with the people sitting next to you, I'd just like you to share what are some of the things that you don't like being asked to do. Okay? Just very quickly, have that conversation. Okay. So before that gets too out of hand, now, church, I did toy with the idea at this point of getting the microphone and coming and seeing what some of the responses were. But then I sort of thought, I don't want to be responsible for any ruined summers or family feuds. So I think we'll leave those conversations where they are. Clearly, there are lots of things that we don't like being asked to do, whether we're children, whether we're adults, whether we're somewhere in between. Now, I've actually done a little bit of research, and I've got a list of the top 5 things that children do not like being asked to do, which I thought you might be quite interested in. So let's see if any of the things you've just been discussing come up in our top 5. So we'll count them down. At number 5, we have... we've gone the other way around. Okay, well, let's just bring them all up then. Let's have a look at all of them. So I don't know if you recognize any of those things. I mean, eating vegetables, it's a classic, isn't it? I still remember being asked to have 5 peas on my plate at every meal. Yes, I realize that resonates with a certain generation. Going to bed, yeah, that's boring, isn't it? Turning off your device, children and adults, I would argue. And then we move into the kind of top 2 classic responses. Doing your homework. And as a parent of older children, my youngest is 18, I would say that the number 1 is still very much alive and well in the Whitman household. Now, all the things on that list, I think we would agree, are the right things for us to be doing. We know eating vegetables is good for us. We know that getting the right amount of sleep is important. But it doesn't stop us feeling that sense of dislike when somebody else asks us to do them. In today's passage, which George read for us wonderfully just now, we hear God asking someone, Ananias, to do something that they didn't want to do, even though it was the right thing to do. And I think this is really helpful in giving us some prompts as to how we can become more comfortable in responding to God's prompting in our lives. But before we get to the story of Ananias, I think we do need to do a very quick catch-up on how we got to this point in the story. So who's Saul? Why is he in Damascus? So Saul was not someone that you or I would want to meet, okay? Saul believed that Christians were dangerous. He thought that they were spreading lies about who Jesus was. So he made it his personal mission to stop them. He had already been going from house to house, dragging Christians away and putting them into prison. Saul was not somebody that you wanted knocking on your door. Now he's got heard of this group of Christians in Damascus, and he's set off with special papers from the most important religious leaders, giving him permission to arrest any followers of Jesus that he finds. However, on the way, he encounters Jesus in a vision which leads to him being blinded, after which he's taken to Damascus, where he's waiting for 3 days. So we're up to date. That brings us to today's passage, in which we meet Ananias, the person through whom Jesus is going to restore and repair Saul and set him on a new path. Now, this is a really rich passage of Scripture, I think, and it tells us a great deal about how God works in the lives of people around us and in ourselves. But I think there are 3 things in particular that I'd like us to briefly focus on. Firstly, that God guides, one step at a time. Secondly, that God changes, even things that seem impossible. And thirdly, God uses, even ordinary people. Now, I don't know about you, but sometimes, despite all the technology we have available to us, whether it's sat-nav, Google, Apple Maps, we still sometimes get ourselves a bit lost. We still need to stop people and ask for directions. Actually, that reminds me, Chris and I have arranged to meet some friends after church, for lunch. And we're going to a place, I think it's called the Lamb and Flag. They do a really, really good Sunday lunch, apparently. This won't take a second. Sorry, Josh, you're quite familiar with the city centre, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. If we're leaving church, what's the best way to get to the Lamb and Flag?
Right, sure. So you want to go out the church, down the steps, take a left at the bottom, and you'll be on Great George Street, okay? Then you carry along Great George Street for about half a mile or so with the LGI on your left-hand side, and then you'll come to a bit of a junction, and you need to bear sort of right-ish, and you'll know the place because you'll see a coffee shop on your right, and I think it's called Stage Espresso or Stand Espresso. Anyway, bear right there, and then you'll carry on up Great George Street all the way up until you get to the Catholic Cathedral, and you turn about 90 degrees there, and then you go down the side of the light, in front of the light. Well, anyway, you go down past the Radisson Hotel, and then you cross over the hedgerow and you carry down Park Row as if you're heading to the station, but you don't go as far as the station. You want to turn left onto Bond Street by Nat West, opposite HSBC. Then Bond Street, which turns into Commercial Street, over Albion Street, over Briggate, straight onto Kirkgate, little wriggle past the market, under the railway arches, and you'll see the Minster, and straight ahead of you, it's on your right.
Right. Thanks, Josh. Couldn't be clearer. Left out of church. Good. Okay. Thankfully, that's not quite how God guides Ananias in our story. God's instructions are, thankfully, much more straightforward. In verse 11, we read, "The Lord told him, 'Go to the house of Judas on Straight Street and ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul.'" Simple, straightforward, clear, one step at a time. Now, some of us, me included, might want a little bit more information than that, although perhaps not quite as much information as Josh's instructions. What happens when I get to Jesus' house? Who else is going to be there? What should I do when I meet this guy Saul? Ananias had to trust that God was going to guide him through the next part of the plan, as and when he needed to know that bit. This is often how God guides us. He doesn't always tell us everything. He tells us enough for the next faithful step. Perhaps that's something we need to do more of, to trust God's guidance, even when we can't see exactly where that direction is going to lead us. Trusting Him to guide us one step at a time. Now, secondly, I think the passage shows us that God changes. I love it when we read of recognizable human reactions in the Bible. In verse 13, we see Ananias respond to God's instruction in a way that I think most of us would have some sympathy with. Lord, he says, I have heard many reports about this man and all the harm that he has done to your people. And here he has come with authority to arrest all who call on your name. In other words, Ananias is saying, are you sure about this bloke Saul? I mean, come on, it's Saul. Ananias can't quite believe that someone with that sort of reputation has the capacity to be changed. But as the story goes on, we see that even the seemingly impossible is not beyond God's changing power. I've never been particularly good at sport. I love to watch it. As Chris will attest, I'll watch almost anything on telly that's sporty. And apart from a bit of a racket sports, a bit of squash, a bit of badminton, I've never been much of a sportsman. But the one thing I have done is run. Since my early 20s, I've taken part in countless 5Ks, 10Ks, fun runs, occasionally the odd half marathon. But I've always dismissed the idea of running a marathon. It was something that I thought this body would find impossible. I think I heard some laughter there. However, 3 years ago, the Leeds Marathon made a comeback in honour of the rugby league legend Rob Burrow. Now, I've always loved rugby league, and the route of the marathon was through the streets of Headingley in North Leeds, which is where we live. And it was also my 50th year. So I thought, could I? So I did some research, created a plan, made some changes to my diet, and with a huge amount of support from friends and family, plus months of often painful and quite boring training, I did manage to complete my first ever marathon with my son Tom. Something that I thought was impossible became possible. To Ananias, and probably to most people, the idea that Saul could be changed would have seemed beyond incredible. This was a man who had dedicated his life to hunting down Christians and throwing them into prison, making life miserable for those that simply wanted to follow Jesus and to share his love with them. And yet we hear that following his meeting with Ananias, Saul becomes a humble disciple of Jesus. He is transformed into someone that God uses to spread his word, from fear maker to hope bringer, even at terrible personal cost. God's ability to change people and situations that we think are beyond change is infinite. We find examples throughout the Bible. Moses, from reluctant speaker to leader of a nation. Zacchaeus, from greedy tax collector to generous follower of Jesus. Water into wine, calming the storm, even death defeated. And yet it doesn't stop us from hesitating, from questioning God's plan. Who? Me? What? Him? Go there? Maybe that's something that God is asking you to respond to this morning. To be more willing to acknowledge his changing power. To be more ready to say, yes, lead me. And to trust in his ability to do something that we might consider to be impossible. So God guides, God changes, and finally, God uses. Okay, so I've got an image which I'd like you to take a look at. I'm just interested to know which of those boxes you are most likely to choose if offered. So if you are attracted and would like to receive box 1, just pop your hands up. Any takers for box 1? I mean, it's sort of sparkly, isn't it? Yeah, lovely, nice ribbon. What about box number 2? Or a few more hands, okay? So it's a lovely kaleidoscope of colours, yeah? Box 3? Oh, a lot more. Is that the gardeners in the room, maybe? What about box 4. Anybody want box 4? A few of you. Okay. The majority of the congregation chose either box 1, 2, or 3. Very few people choosing the plain box. And it's not really that surprising, is it? We're naturally drawn to impressive things, the colourful, the shiny, things that stand out. And I wonder if sometimes that's how we imagine God chooses the people that he wants to work with. Do we imagine that if God is choosing someone to change the world, he might choose the strongest, the cleverest, the person with the largest Insta account, the funniest, the most confident, the best speaker, the person who never seems to get nervous? Ananias is a bit like box number 4. He isn't wealthy, he isn't famous, he's not a great preacher, he's not even one of the 12 disciples. In fact, in our passage, he's simply described as a disciple in Damascus. That's it. An ordinary follower of Jesus. And in fact, after this chapter in Acts 9, he almost completely disappears from the Bible. Yet just think what God trusted him with. I think the truth is that we need to recognize God isn't looking for impressive people. God is looking for available people. Ananias' job lasts about 5 minutes, 10 minutes at max. Walk to a house, lay hands on Saul, pray, call him brother. That's it. Yet without those few minutes, Saul's story looks very, very different. God changes history through somebody simply knocking on one door. The story of Ananias and Saul shows us that God is ready to use whoever is available and willing. God promises to equip us, and we need to have trust in that truth. Now, as we heard from Josh earlier, following our church plant to St. Luke's, we have a wide range of vacancies across the church to help serve in the life of St. George's. Perhaps you're curious about some of those opportunities, but think that there are probably people that are better equipped or better qualified to do them. Maybe this morning is the time to say to God, I'm here and I'm ready. What would you have me do? Ananias accepted the calling that God made on him, and he changed a life that went on to do incredible things in the life of God's church. What's the calling that God is waiting for us to respond to? Whose lives is he waiting for us to transform? We started this morning by asking the question, who doesn't like being told what to do? I wonder, having looked at Ananias' story, whether we should be asking ourselves a different question. If God is the one doing the asking, who is ready to be told what to do? Answering yes to that question might feel pretty scary, but we know that God is ready to guide us step by step on the path that he wants us to take. We know that God is able to change even the most impossible of situations. And we know that God is ready to use us, even us, to bring about his kingdom here, today, in Leeds. Amen.